Joining us right now, our colleague, our friend, to many of us, a hero, Mark Levin. Thanks for joining us, great one.
It's a pleasure. I don't want to get between you if you're both beside each other.
I'm about to say, this is kind of a dream come true for me. I got Larry on one side, Mark Levin on the other.
Wow.
I'm the best of both worlds.
Don't tell the Supreme Court.
No, don't. Actually, they'd probably approve it at this point.
Well, that was actually going to be my first question, Mark. I know that, I listened to you quite a bit on Friday, and I'm just curious, based on the logic in this decision, and I really... Mark, a lot of people have different opinions about whether two people should be able to be together and have a marriage, and that to me, that's secondary at this point, based on what the Supreme Court did and how they reached this conclusion. Is there anything standing in the way of a three-person couple or cousins or brothers getting married at this point?
Well, let me first say this. The Constitution, as written, really doesn't exist anymore. Now, there are little pockets of it that do. If the powers that be want it to exist. But the fact of the matter is, and we have to come to grips with this, in many respects we are in a post-constitutional period. So when people say, look, accept what the court did and move on, what do you mean accept what the court did and move on? I don't care if it's gay marriage or if it's whatever it is. This country belongs to us. We don't have to accept anything. And it's amazing when people say, you have to accept that they have the final say on the law. This isn't the law. This is power. This is pure power. This has nothing to do with the law. Everybody knows it. You don't have to be a lawyer. You can read with your two eyes. You see what they've done here. You have basically Anthony Kennedy and four goose-stepping leftists who never break. Have you noticed that? They never break on the big decisions,
Yeah.
Obamacare, same-sex marriage, or whatever. This case should never have come to the Supreme Court, and it started 10 years ago in a case called Lawrence versus Texas, a sodomy case. And Anthony Kennedy and three other justices, it only takes four, reached down into the cert pile of 7,000 or 8,000 petitions to the court and said, we're going to take this one. So they've been building this, and there's a case before that. I'm not going to bore you, and they were called Romer, and then the DOMA case. They've been building and building and building towards this. You know, there is a brisk debate about this subject going on in the country, in the states, and so forth. If the courts would just get the hell out of the way and let we, the people, decide, how can it possibly be that we're smart enough to elect a president and senators and congressmen and governors, but we're not smart enough to decide for ourselves moral issues? Every single major moral or cultural or social issue, whatever nomenclature you want to use, now has to be decided by 5 people on the court. For all I know, 3 of them are perverts. We don't know anything about them. Why is that in a great society? Let me ask you this question rhetorically. So one justice moves over 5-4. Now it's a fundamental constitutional right. If that one justice went the other way, it's not a fundamental constitutional right. Are you kidding me?
How can that be?
Now,
Okay.
here's the other thing.
Yes.
The 14th Amendment not only doesn't address marriage or anything like this, despite all these preposterous arguments, now the 14th Amendment, as rewritten by our ongoing constitutional convention in the court, conflicts with the First Amendment and religious liberty. Now, endless battles over that. Who do you think is going to win those battles?
Who wins that? That's right.
So people say, let's move on. Now we'll protect your religious liberty. Who's going to protect our religious liberty? The 5 coconuts on the Supreme Court? I don't think so.
Lindsey Graham, he'll protect it for us. That's what he said.
Talking about coconuts. Okay, so Mark, I have this question for you. You have states like Colorado, like Washington, where the people actually voted and they decided to legalize marijuana, and yet it's illegal federally. In this case, you have states that have come out and said, we don't want the gay marriage amendment, and you have federally, these judges have now said, nope, guess what? It's now legal. Does it seem like this administration is picking and choosing which policies that they want to sit there and go after?
Well,
that's the nature of tyranny, isn't it?
Yeah. And that judicial tyranny, as Ted Cruz called it.
I guess Scotty's voicing this frustration that I've seen from a lot of friends. It's frustrating to see the inconsistency here. I mean, concealed carry laws. Why don't those transcend from state to state?
Let me tell you something. This creates absolute unpredictability and instability. So now, rather than the law being the safe haven, this is what is meant when we talk about equality, not economic equality, which is totalitarianism. We're talking about equality under the law. So when you have justices who can pick and choose, and Scalia said this in one of his dissents, he said, well, now we have a court that decides which law it likes, which law doesn't like, and which law wants to change. How the hell is anybody supposed to figure out what's going on here? And people have to understand, this is not really a Supreme Court anymore. It is a lawless sort of Politburo where these people are there. And as for lifetime appointments, I heard my dear friend in the years, Joe DeGeneres, say, no, I like that. The framers did that. Well, the framers did some things that we don't like, and I can assure you that if the framers knew that this is what would happen with lifetime appointments, they would never have supported lifetime appointments. Of course there should be term limits if judges are going to act like legislators. Does anybody know? Does anybody know which court doesn't act like a legislature anymore?
Right.
This one clearly does.
Even in California, there's 20 states right now that have a review process by the voters over these judicial nominees.
Well, I have a different view. You know, our good friend Ted Cruz says we would have retention elections. I don't believe in elections in any respect when it comes to judges because my unalienable rights shouldn't be up for a vote by some jerk in my neighborhood, as far as I'm concerned. Now, that said, I think their terms should be limited. Right. One other power Congress has that I talked about on Friday, I mean, apart from impeachment, which is never going to happen, Congress actually has the power to limit the Supreme Court's jurisdiction outside of those areas not specifically mentioned in the Constitution. Do you know the circuit courts and district courts don't exist in the Constitution? They're created by the judiciary acts that Congress passes.
Huh.
They have this power. But we're not allowed. We got to move on, John K. Look, let's move on.
Let's move on.
Over. Let's just move. I'm not moving on. Damn it.
Well, let me ask you this question, and then this is the we'll get into this definitely in the next break. Many people the day after Saturday morning felt like they were in mourning, that they had lost their country. I want you, Mark, to give us hope and tell us that it's not the end all be all. That the people still can overpower the justice system in this case and do the right thing.
Well, and how?
Well, and how they do it. Is this the end for, is this truly the end all be all in regards to Obamacare now fully? We can't defund it. And in regards to now we talk about traditional marriage.
In order to be able to deal with things, we got to deal with reality. I'm not going to put a smiley face on this. This republic is hanging on by a thread. We, the people, we keep talking about. Have you noticed that we, the people, have no say in anything? We, the people, don't want Obamacare, and it's here. We, the people, were discussing same-sex marriage. Now it's imposed on us. We, the people, have no say about the EPA and all the rest of this stuff. More and more of our government is unrelated, is disconnected from the consent of the governed. The only option we have, and I've been beating the drum on this, is Article 5, the Convention of the States, where we, the people, through federalism, through the 10th Amendment, can get our state legislatures to pull some of this power back. Otherwise, Scotty, it will be over because the central government is not going to reform itself. John Roberts worked in the Reagan administration. He was nominated by a Republican president to the Supreme Court, George W. Bush. He was supposed to be an originalist on the court. He's a liar. Anthony Kennedy was nominated by Ronald Reagan, had been on the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. He is a liar. I will tell you, Harry Blackmun was considered the conservative on the Minnesota Court of Appeals, appointed by Nixon. He wrote Roe v. Wade. John Paul Stevens, considered a moderate Republican, appointed by Ford. He wrote the most outrageous EPA decision in American history. How many more presidents do we have to elect? How many more of these fools do we have to nominate till we, the people, really do something about it? And I'm tired of commentators and writers telling us, just accept it and move along. Damn it, it's our country, and I'm not going to accept it and move along.
Mark Levin, it's too important of a day. Can you stay with us for just 3 more minutes? Because I want to ask you about the Liberty Amendments that you wrote about in the Article 5 Convention. Thank you so much, Mark. Mark Levin stays with us.
Accept the court's ruling. Fight for the religious liberties of every American.
There's Lindsay. There's Lindsay yesterday. Accept the ruling. Mark Levin, I feel like we've come full circle with your entire literary career because the first book of yours that I ever read was Men in Black, and you specifically talked about how the Supreme Court is really messing everything up and hijacking our democracy. And the last book of yours that I read was the Liberty Amendments, where you talk about the possibility of an Article 5 convention. Can I focus in on the Liberty Amendments for a second? Because my understanding is in Article 5, there's 2 different options. You could have either a full-blown constitutional convention where No? Okay, so thanks. So it's really just a ratification process, right?
Look at it this way. The states used to meet, and they used to meet all the time to discuss issues of concern and that overlapped and try and work things out. So 2 days before the end of the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia, in the summer of 1787, they had this amendment process, Article 5, in which a supermajority of both houses of Congress, 2/3, could propose amendments to the states for ratification by convention or by the state legislatures, and you'd need 3/4. That's a high hurdle.
Yeah.
George Mason stands up and he says, wait a minute. The central government that will be oppressive and tyrannical, I predict, will not propose amendments to control itself. So short of violence, there needs to be a civil means built into the Constitution where the people in the states can address this. So the states should be able to propose amendments to the states and then and ratify amendments that way. So all it is rather than 2/3 of both houses of Congress, it is 2/3 of the state legislatures at a convention of the states proposing amendments to the entirety of the states where you still need 3/4 to ratify. This idea of a runaway, I don't know where this comes from. Are you telling me that 13 Republican state legislatures, and you don't even need 13, you just need one house in a state legislature, wouldn't stop some stupid idea that comes out of there? If conservatives believe in federalism, this is quintessential federalism. How do you think you got amendments in the first place?
Right.
3/4 of the states. And the fear should be in what's going on now. We have an ongoing constitutional convention. I keep talking about this in Washington, D.C. The court keeps demonstrating it to us. And to say elect Republican presidents and put good people on the court, it is not going to work. This is a fundamental structural problem now.
But here's the question, Mark. We can't get our act together. If you haven't noticed, the GOP, we're kind of doing it to ourselves. Obama had the best week ever last week because of the GOP. So every time we think we have a plan that we're unified behind fighting something, we are easily fractured and easily splintered.
We are not unified behind this, are we? And this is going to take time. People are going to reach a point, I don't know if it's next year, 10 years, 20 years from now. Abraham Lincoln sought to reach for this. But the Civil War blew out of control. It started before he was elected. He mentioned Article 5. Ronald Reagan mentioned Article 5. Milton Friedman has mentioned Article 5. Everett Dirksen mentioned Article 5. Dwight Eisenhower mentioned Article 5. It's not some radical notion. I didn't invent it.
Yeah.
But
and it's not unprecedented. This is how we ratified the 21st Amendment, which did away with abolition, right?
Well, I'll tell you this. What do you think would happen, Larry, if we came close to a convention of the states on some of these issues? The knuckleheads in Washington would move so fast to get in front of this because they would want to make sure that we didn't have such a convention. That convention, things like that, they could propose term limits for members of Congress, term limits for Supreme Court. It doesn't mean it's going to happen. You still have to get it ratified. We could do a lot of things to get this country back in shape. Washington is taking us over the cliff. They've now thrown out the rule of law. I'm telling you, the door is wide open now, and we have got to shut it.
Mark Levin, it's always great to hear you every night here on WMAL from 6 to 9, and even a special treat to hear you in the mornings when you join us. Thanks for joining us.
You're a good friend. God
Thank
bless
you,
you,
Mark.
guys.
And if any of you want to cleanse yourself with some clarity and some inspiration, start with Men in Black, Mark Levin's first book, for at least the first one I read. I think it was his first book, and then get to Liberty Amendments, and you'll see the path forward.